I have spent crazy, stupid money working with marketers who, no offense, are crooks. They promise you the world and they deliver nothing, while in the meantime, you're writing checks to them. So over the last 3 years, I have spent like 200,000 of my money in marketing, and the results were marginal.
Hi, this is Dennis Consorte with Snackable Solutions, and I am here with Bharat Kanodia.
Hi, Dennis. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Tell our audience a little bit about you, what you do, and what gets you up in the morning.
I am a valuation geek. I tell owners, investors, founders what their companies are worth. So if somebody is looking to invest in a startup, or looking to raise capital, or looking to sell their business or buy a business, I'm a good place to start, because first thing you need to know what the price tag is.
Interesting. And what kinds of businesses do you usually work with? How big are they? How small are they? Where do you come in?
So I have valued small businesses with revenue about $1 million, and largest businesses like Uber and Airbnb. I'm one of the few valuation experts in the country who can value tangible assets like a factory or a power plant or a dam, all the way to the other side of the spectrum, intangible assets like a patent or a trademark, and things in the middle. So I can value a wide variety of things, including a variety of companies. So the analogy I give is, think of me as a vet, a fish, a frog, a horse, a dog. It's all the same.
Why a vet instead of a doctor?
Doctor still only deals with humans.
That makes sense. So a vet, you have more variety, different kinds of animals that you're working with. And you described a number of different kinds of businesses. Which type is your favorite, or is there one?
I enjoy doing unique assets. So I've been fortunate or unfortunate to have valued some of the most unique assets in the world, including many pre-revenue startups that are asking for a pre-money valuation of $30 million, or the Golden Gate Bridge, or you are in Queens, you said, so the Veristrat Bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge. I have appraised the throughway system that goes from New York to Albany to Niagara.
That's interesting, because I've worked with somebody who we're discussing ways to raise revenue for New York State. And one of the things we spoke about was leasing naming rights on bridges. So it's really fascinating that you're talking about actual valuations of bridges. How does that come up in a conversation, or how does that becomes a project for you?
Most people, they think that a valuation is only needed for a deal or a transaction of some kind, which is only a subset of why valuations might be needed. Valuations are needed for insurance, they're needed for accounting, they're needed for taxes, and of course, deals. So when somebody builds a bridge, they need to get insurance on it. And the insurance company wants to know that, hey, how much premium should we charge? And that depends on what that bridge or what that infrastructure asset is worth.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So can you tell me about one of your favorite projects? What made it interesting? What were some of the challenges associated with it? Were there any problems that you had to solve?
The I Love New York campaign. I have valued the I Love New York campaign. And if you were to ask any New Yorker, they by default presume that the I Love New York campaign is either just a slogan of the citizens and by the citizens and for the citizens, or they might think it's owned by the city of New York. And it's neither of those things. It is actually owned by the state of New York. So I had to value that campaign. And the biggest problem was, how do I estimate what that campaign is worth? Because I got to start with top line revenue. But it's not even just revenue. It's all the goodwill and all the goodness that campaigns provide to the state. And my job was to capture all that goodness and translate that goodness into money or value. That was almost impossible, because if I cannot gauge the overall revenue or overall penetration of the campaign, I can't gauge its true value. For example, the Eiffel Tower, right? The Eiffel Tower, there might be a cost to build it, there might be a cost to replace it, there might be a cost to sell it as a business. But if you were to try to account that, hey, how much does the Eiffel Tower add to the French or the Parisian economy? Well, that's almost impossible because that accounts for everything. Hey, you want an Eiffel Tower facing suite? Well, instead of 300 euros, it's going to be 500 euros. Well, how do you capture that delta? You can't. So I have to work with whatever data is available. So the I Love New York campaign was a very, very interesting project I worked on.
And was there a final outcome that you're able to share in terms of the valuation and how you got there?
There was an outcome. I can't share the numbers, but I can tell you it was in 9 digits. Basically, you start with top line revenue, and then you understand that what kind of royalty does that campaign bring to the state, and estimate that royalty 20, 30 years out and present value it.
And is that a similar process you would use on the consumer side? Let's say I had some intellectual property, I thought it was worth something. Would I go through a similar process to get to my number?
That is one of the processes we will be going through. And that's why I said I'm a vet, a dog, a horse, a frog, a fish, because we just went from the I Love New York campaign to a personal trademark. It is still intellectual property, it's just different size and different benefits.
And what about the utility of something? Does that come into play versus the branding?
Of course, I mean, anything, say, for example, the Brooklyn Bridge. You look at the bridge many different ways. You could look at the bridge as in, hey, what will it cost to replace it? Or what it costed the city back in the 19th century to build the bridge, and you present value and you inflation adjust that number to today. Or you could look at the bridge as a business. So say if the Brooklyn Bridge brings in cash flow of say $50 million a year, what would you pay for a business that brings you $50 million in profit annually? There are many ways of looking at it. Again, valuation is science. You use the science to come up with different numbers, but then how those numbers align with each other, that's really the art piece.
Some people say that you take a multiple of the revenue that a business generates. Is that a good way to evaluate a business that's generating revenue?
That is a way to value a business. That's not the only way, that is a way. But most times people just say, oh, that's the business. My neighbor's cousin's wife sold her business for 5x on revenue, so my business is worth 5x on revenue. These are the kind of things I generally hear, which I'm not saying they're wrong, but that is just one data point. Do you really want to hang your hat on one data point?
In my world, I work with a number of startups, and it's always a challenge when they're brand new companies and they come up with these valuations, and they're really not based on anything tangible. It's amazing how these numbers come into play. So if I were working with a startup and they weren't generating any revenue, but we knew who the investors are, who the board is, who the team is, and we can think about the potential for that company, how do you take that information and put a number on it?
I have done a video on something like this, which is the name of the video is called How to Bait a Shark. And companies which have no revenue, no product, an idea, but 2 smart guys and 2 laptops working out of a garage. 10, 12 years ago, when I used to work for Silicon Valley Bank, we would say, oh, that's worth about $500,000. Pretty simple, throw a number at it. It's right or wrong, it doesn't matter, but it's a starting point. Now that equation has changed significantly. 2 smart guys, 2 laptop, an idea working out of a garage is worth $1 million. You add a product to it, it's worth $5 million. You add customer proof of concept to it, and you have 1 or 2 customers, paying customers, even if they're making $500 a year, doesn't matter, $10 million. But the most important piece is the 2 guys or gals, they have to be credible. And the valuation sort of steps up from there. Now, what I laugh is I get a call from 2 college kids who are working out of their basement, and they're like, oh, we have a product, we have no revenue, but we're hosting it on Amazon Web Servers, and we're looking for a $4 million valuation. I'm like, how did you come up with that? Well, my cousin's friend's husband sold their company at $4 million for the first seed round, so we think we're about that. I'm like, okay, then go get your $4 million. What are you calling me for? So the problem is, as you work with startups, most startups and most first-time founders put too much weight on the valuation they get for their first round. And it doesn't really matter. The first round valuation, it doesn't matter. You should be looking for the right person to work with, not the valuation they offer you. Because if they just give you a high valuation, they might be hurting you in the long run.
There are so many real world examples related to this. And one that I'm thinking of, we have an amazing investor and we've got a couple $1 million behind the project. And we're in a bridge round right now where we're looking to bring some more money and bring some more investors and move us closer to our Series A. Is there some advice you would give us on who we should be looking at and who we should stay away from as far as new investors for this project?
Look for people you can see yourself working long-term. Look for people who you can see yourself talking to daily, because there's no perfect investor. It's like there's no perfect partner. There's no perfect wife. There's no perfect husband. It's to each their own, right? Somebody that works for you doesn't work for me, and vice versa. So the same thing with an investor. Look for an investor that you would want to talk to on a daily basis, because when shit hits the fan, and it will at some point or the other, if you're running a startup and things are never going to go smoothly, you want somebody who's going to call you and say, hey, Dennis, I heard this happen. I know it sucks. What can I do to help? You don't want to getting a call saying, hey, Dennis, what the fuck? What are you doing? How come you didn't do this? That's not the kind of call you want.
So someone you can work with every day. Is that what a lot of investors want? Or do some of them want to be more hands-off?
No, when I say working with every day, I don't mean you actually have to talk to them every day. That's not what I meant. But somebody you like working with, somebody you would hang out with. I'm not saying you go and have beers with the investor, obviously, or keep your arm's length distance, but somebody who's cordial, who's relatable, who's not going to be a dick.
That makes good sense. And what about in the pitch? What would you say, as somebody who knows the valuation side of things, what are important elements that should be part of a pitch when you talk to an investor?
I think 50% of the time in a pitch should be spent in talking about your story or the why. Why are you doing this? Why do you care? And basically, I want to know the why, because when things go bad, when times get tough, I want to know that you're not just going to walk away and say, all right, well, it was too difficult. I want to know your why. I want to know your hook, because I'm on the hook. If I'm writing a check to you, I'm on the hook. Second, so 50% on talking about your why. 30%, you should be talking about the customer demand. What is creating the demand for your product? And not talking about total accessible market or whatever that TAM, total addressable market, not that. Talk about the demand. Why is the demand? What does the customer want to buy from you? Or what do you offer that nobody else does? What is the problem that you're solving? And then spend the rest of the time talking about the team. Why us? Why are we going to work together? And that's it. Don't talk about valuations. Let them talk about valuations.
That sounds like great advice. And oftentimes when you get an investor meeting, they say, send me the pitch deck. They want to look at it before you have a chance to talk to them. Is that a good move?
No. Terrible. Worst move. I get pitch decks all the time, and I don't even see one of them. Why should I see that? Am I getting paid for that? No. Instead, if I received a quick 5-minute video, which is a pitch, if you can tell me about your why, about your customer, about your team in 5 minutes, and ideally not just the one founder. If the entire management team is there, the founding team is there, one person, two person, five people, and they're all talking on the pitch, not at the same time, hopefully, that's what's going to get me, because then I almost know you. I've already heard you. I've heard you talk. I know your body language. Then I might give you a call or ask you to set up something. Just a pitch. I mean, pitches, these guys get like 200 pitches a day, 200 pitch decks a day.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing that's interesting is oftentimes investors will say, yeah, let's just have a casual meeting. And you go into it thinking you're just going to have a chat like this. And then they say, okay, walk me through the pitch. Is that something that they do intentionally to see if you're thinking on your feet?
Yeah. No, and you should be ready. I mean, again, it should not be a pitch. It should be coming from within. Hey, what's your why, Dennis? Why are you doing this? Why do you care? Because if you don't care, and if you don't know your why should I care? And that's not something you need to be prepared for. Like somebody asks you, hey, Dennis, what do you do? Do you say to them, hey, I don't have my pitch deck, I can't tell you? No, Dennis should be able to talk about what he does. The same thing with a pitch. Well, you don't need a deck. That's why they called it an elevator pitch back in the day, right? You got 60 to 90 seconds to get it out. And there was a reason for that. Well, because that's a part of you. If you are truly engaged and committed, then it's not just something that I am going to do in January. It's something that I'm committed to.
That's right. So for a startup, when is the right time to come to somebody like you? And what kinds of questions or what kind of information should they have ready for their conversation?
I mean, I would first ask is, hey, what kind of customer traction do you have? What kind of product do you have? I mean, if you don't have customer traction, if you don't know anything about a customer or why you're building the product, that means you're just two guys who close their garage door and just sitting there and tinkering away and building something that you think is cool, which might be cool. I'm not saying it's not cool, but it only becomes cool to investors, or it becomes investable when there's a demand for it. Unless you're that smart that you can create a demand for it, like Steve Jobs. And nowadays, every founder thinks, you know, he or she is Steve Jobs, which I think like breeds like in Silicon Valley.
And on that note, you've worked with companies, like you've evaluated companies like Uber. Are there any trends right now? I know that we're in the middle of not a recession, where inflation is at an all-time high. We're in the middle of the quote unquote great resignation. Are there any trends that you see in terms of investable companies or companies looking for valuations?
Companies whose business model is based on recurring revenue. You don't have to go out and find a new customer on a daily basis. The same customer pays you money again and again and again, maybe on a weekly or a monthly or a quarterly or an annual basis. Any business where you can set up a business model with recurring revenue, that is investable.
Got it. And in your calculations, are you looking at things like lifetime value? How would you even compute something like that for a business that hasn't done any business yet?
You can, but I need to know that, hey, are your systems and your product is set up that it can accept recurring revenue payments? Or is your customer's profile avatar set up in a way where she will happily let you charge their card on a monthly basis? Those are the things that I'll be looking for.
Yeah, this is really interesting stuff. It feels like there's a lot of overlap with just general marketing in what you do. Do you agree?
I am a student of marketing, and I have become a student of marketing because I have spent crazy, stupid money working with marketers who, no offense, are crooks. They promise you the world and they deliver nothing, while in the meantime, you're writing checks to them. So over the last 3 years, I have spent like 200,000 of my money in marketing, and the results were marginal. So once COVID happened, I basically said, you know what, the hell with this. I'm going to take my money and I'm going to do what I want with it. So now I run marketing myself. And I don't know anything about marketing. I just keep making mistakes and learning from those mistakes. But it's far better to do that than to hire some schmuck who's going to charge me $8,000 a month. And at the end of the month, I got nothing to show for it.
Yeah, I think that's the case with any business relationship. You really have to vet people and make sure that they're a fit for you and that they're able to back up the things that they say they can do 100%. And I would also say that you're a really good client, because if at one point you decide, you know what, let me bring on a marketer, you're already educated, you know what the expectations really should be based on your own work. So I'm with you on that. So as this final piece, we like to do a snackable solution, which is just a really short couple of minute solution where you give people a few points on something they can do, and at the end of it, their business is a little bit better or they have some good outcome. Can you share your snackable solution, Bharat?
If you want to double the value of your business, you have to do two things and only two things. Other people will say you have to do 4, you have to do 5, you have to do 12. Bullshit. Two things, and focus on the fundamentals. First, create a business model that brings you recurring revenue. Somehow you need to find customers that are willing to pay you on a monthly or a weekly or a daily or a quarterly basis. Because if you are going to look for investors, if you're looking for buyers of your business, they will be looking for business with consistent cash flow. And recurring revenue gives consistent cash flow to any business. That's one. Number two, you need to service that cash flow with automation. Now, not everything can be automated, but when people hear the word automation, they're like, no, no, my business can't be automated. Yes, it can. Not everything about it can be automated, but what can? How about your account receivables? How about your marketing? How about your email outreach? How about your feedback? How about your internal improvement process? Anything that can be automated or used via software or a system, do that, because that's what increases value. Because when you sell your business to a new buyer, or when you bring in a new investor, they will be asking you, hey, what kind of policies and systems and processes you have? And if you say, no, I am the system, I am the process, well, what happens if you run into a bus? What happens? The business is gone. Well, that's a problem. So only two things.
Very good. And Bharat, how do people find you online? I'll be sure to share your links, but how do people find you?
Best way to find me is just Google my name, Bharat Kanodia, or go to YouTube and look for Bharat Kanodia, and my email will pop up as part of my channel, and feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help first-time founders.
Great stuff. And is there anything else you'd like to share, Bharat?
No, Dennis, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. This has been great.